want us to realize that what God is after is not outward obedience. Many of us can obey outwardly. We obey God outwardly, but that's not what He wants. Pharisees did not commit adultery. They did not kill. They did not steal. They did not covet. But inside, they were full of it. That's why they were called hypocrites. They committed adultery with their minds. They killed in their thoughts with hate. They stole and coveted everything and anything. Obeying the law out of fear is not what is required. We ought to obey out of love. And that's what we're trying to drive this point home. We have to obey God out of love, not out of fear, that if we do not obey the commands of God, that somehow God is going to punish us. Some people actually obey God because out of the reason that if they do something for God, that God would owe them something. And people do that, many people in the world. Some obey the law out of self-interest to get something out of it. They restrain from evil because they feel that God will owe them and repay them. But listen to what Matthew 22 says, starting with verse 37. And He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands depend all the law and the prophets." So love is basically the summation of the entire Ten Commandments. If you look at the first commandment or all the commandments found in Exodus chapter 20, first commandment says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Love can be defined as being loyal. Love is loyal. You ought to be loyal to God and Him alone. That's the first commandment. It is the law of love. Love is loyal. Second commandment, you shall not make a carved image. Love is faithful. You ought not to make a wooden image or carved image of any kind. You shall not make a carved image. Love is faithful. Third commandment, you shall not take the name of God in vain. Love is reverent. You and I use God's name in vain all the time, whether we like to admit it or not. We abuse the name of God. We take advantage of His power, and we use His name only when we want something. We even throw in the phrase, "in the name of Jesus," as if it's a formula that we put at the end of our prayers. We say to God what we want, and then we say, "in the name of Jesus," as if that's somehow like a genie, if you will, getting what you want using that formula. That's not how we ought to be, of course. The fourth commandment is remember the Sabbath day. That means love is holy, keeping the Sabbath day holy. Remember the holy day. Remember the Sabbath day. And this refers to the seventh day at the time, but at the time of Jesus and after His resurrection, that seventh day became the first day. We now worship on the eighth day. We keep the first day of the week holy. We keep the first day holy, not out of obligation, not out of legalism, but we keep it holy because even though every day belongs to God, He has designated that one day, first day of the week, to be the time of people to gather. Yes, the first century Christians met every day. Every day belongs to God. But there is that special day, one day. The day of the resurrection was on the first day of the week. Jesus appeared to His disciples many times on the first day of the week, and the writers of the New Testament made it clear to make a point that it was the first day. Whenever they make an emphasis, it is for us to realize the importance of it. First day, on the first day, early dawn, it emphasizes when that moment was. And so likewise, we ought to keep and remember the first day, the Sabbath day, if you will, Sunday, holy. Love is holy. The fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. Honor your father and mother. Love is honor. Honor. Bowing and respecting those worthy of respect. Bowing and respecting those worthy of respect. If you call yourself a Christian, and if you have a parent or parent figure, if you have somebody that has bore you, someone that has given you life, someone that is supervising and caring over you, no matter what your age, You ought to be loving them, obeying them, and not only that, honoring, which is attitude behind your obedience. You cannot call yourself a Christian and not obey, not honor your parents. Even though most of us in this room are already grown, old enough to have our own children, yes, but we were given life by our parents. We ought to be giving them honor. And having said that, I used to visit my parents in the valley every other week. In recent couple of 3 months, because of the mission trips and because of all kinds of events and activities, I have not been able to visit them. I feel so awful, but I just cannot bring my body up to it on Monday morning to see them. But in my heart, I am so much in honoring them. We mean it, but we can't follow through somehow. And I just want to bring this point home that if you have a parents that you can call your own today, you ought to be showing respect and honor. Did you know that next to obeying our God, showing respect to Him, the second in line where we ought to be showing honor and respect are our parents? Most of you are doing that already. And most of the time when I'm preaching to the choir. I ought to be doing so to another group. You are already doing that. But I am saying, do better than you are. Show more honor. Show more respect to your parents. And do you know that after the fourth commandment, the first one, the second half of the 10 commandments begins with honor your mother and father, for you will live long on earth that the Lord God has given you. The second part of the 10 commandments, starting with the 5th through the 10th, the first one of the second half is honor your father and mother. There's a reason for that. God puts importance in honoring our parents. 6th commandment, you shall not murder. You shall not murder. Murder is different from killing. You can kill accidentally, but murder is with intent. You shall not murder because every life is sacred. Love can be defined as protection. Love is protection. That is the 6th commandment. 7th commandment, you shall not commit adultery. Our lives are to be to exalt what is good and virtuous. So love can be defined as being pure. Love is pure. 8th commandment, you shall not steal. Love is unselfish. You say, I'm not really a stealer. I don't steal. You know, sometimes I go to these markets and people, and I hate to say, this particular race, Korean, they taste these fruits. I don't think we're supposed to, but they, maybe every once in a while, to see if they're ripe and tasty, okay. But if you are feeding yourself, that's stealing. 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 You might think you're innocent. You might say, I don't really lie. I only white lie. I only exaggerate. These are all forms of lies or steals. They're very much so connected. Stealing, lying. And we come to the 9th commandment, which is, you shall not bear false witness. Love is truthful. This is terrible. White lie, stretching the truth, exaggerating, false witness, not telling the whole truth, keeping some facts. This is a difficult one, I admit. If someone comes to you who's close to you and says, hey, how do I look? You don't want to lie. So what do? You look about the same as yesterday. Sometimes when I preach and some people ask, hey, what do you think about the preaching today? What do you think about the sermon? And I'm standing right behind them, and they don't know what to say. So if it's good, obviously they'll say, that was great, Pastor. It was very inspirational. But if it was, they would say like, Pastor, nice try. It's like, good try, Pastor. We don't want to lie. And when we tell the truth, however, we end up hurting people. So these commandments are almost impossible to keep, and yet that's what we are told. And we have some people that are so brutally honest. They don't beat around the bush. They don't coat it with anything. They just Say it like it is. Oh, you look awful. You stink. How was the dinner I prepared for you? Ugh, terrible. Final commandment is you shall not covet, because love is content. Love is content. Americans are covetous. We want what we do not have. We want what others have. And we are in debt because we want to show off. We want to live in luxury. We want to do things to show off and to display what we have with our cars, with our homes, whatever, with our clothing. But we are told not to covet, because love is content, love is truthful, love is unselfish, love is pure, love is protection, love is honor, love is holy, love is reverent, love is faithful, and love is loyal. So God says basically two things: love me, and love people. Love me and love others. On that hang all the law and the prophets. On that hang all the law and the prophets. The debt of love is an unpayable debt, as we said. You will pay it all your life, but never pay it up. So your debt is to keep on loving and keep on loving. If you have had trouble in the past loving your neighbor and those you cannot stand, those people that you just do not like, those who you despise, you are commanded tonight to love them and keep on loving them. And the discharge of that is simply toward your neighbor. Anyone who comes across your path ought to feel your love. A lot of times we cannot express our love. Sometimes we are unable to express what's deeply inside our hearts due to our personality, due to our shyness, due to whatever else reasons. We are unable to express how we truly feel in our family, with our close relationships, with our neighbors. We are sometimes unable to express. But yet, I would dare say, if the other person cannot feel it, then we have to own up to our responsibility. So we have to try. We have to try harder. Not in a phony way, not in an obligation or legalistic way, but so that people will feel the love that they must and should receive. Finally, the fulfillment of love in verse 8. Or the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. And also at the end of verse 10, therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. It is the fulfillment of love. Verse 8 literally says, for the one loving has fulfilled the other law. Again, for the one loving has fulfilled the other law. What is that other law? It is the second part of Matthew 22, where we are told to love God with all our soul, heart, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors as you love yourself. It is that second part. It is that other law. A Pharisee, a legalist, someone keeping the law out of fear and out of self-interest, they may restrain themselves from adultery, murder, lying, and coveting, wanting to appear religious, but they can never fulfill the law, never fill up its intent. It is because all are superficial. They're only doing so, it is superficial. Their heart is not in it. Matthew 5:17, of course, says, Jesus, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Jesus says, I did not come to destroy the law. See, you might think that you are not saved by the law. But Jesus says, I came to perfect it. I did not come to destroy it. I did not come to abolish it. We are commanded to keep the law, but because we can't, Jesus came and kept the law. So by the fact of Jesus keeping the law, we too then, we are keepers of the law because of what Jesus has done on our behalf. You might think, is it grace versus law? No, it is both. You have to keep the law. We have to keep the law, only we cannot. There's no way that we can keep the law. Even if you were to keep it from the moment that we were born till the day we die, we will still be in or under sin because of the original sin that we have all inherited. Jesus kept the law, and through the law, he has been made righteous. He who was righteous all along, he did that to impute his righteousness to us. He has imputed his righteousness to us as if we have been lived a perfect life, and as if he has lived an imperfect life, full of sinful life. He has lived a perfect life by keeping the law entirely, so that you and I are given this perfection, this virtuous perfection through Jesus Christ. That is why we have salvation. So when God the judge looks at us, he would look at us and say, oh, you have kept the law. You are justified because of Jesus. Verse 10 says, gives to the law the full measure of its fulfillment. Gives to the law the full measure of its fulfillment. Remember, again, from chapters 3 to 11, everything has been about salvation. Now that we have been redeemed, we see the result in chapter 12, when we talked about presenting our bodies and to the church and around the world. We have talked about our relationship to all of our society, which ought to be characterized by love. Maybe I can explain it this way. In music, as you know, there are only 7 notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Do, which is the same as the first, so it's basically 7 notes. These 7 notes can be learned by a child within an hour. But a Handel or a Bach or a Beethoven could not exhaust those 7 notes in a lifetime. 7 notes can express the grand gifts of love, including devotion, heroism, martyrdom, patriotism. Its combinations are so infinite, a lifetime could never begin to exhaust its possibilities. Likewise, we are given the potential of love. We ought to be spending our entire life unable to exhaust it, but our attempt is to love, because that is the fulfillment of love. 1 Corinthians 13, which came from a group of people in South Africa. This is a paraphrased version of 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 to 3. And I think we have it up there. If I have the language perfectly and speak like a native and have not love for them, I am nothing. If I have diplomas and degrees and know all the up-to-date methods and have not this touch of understanding love, I am nothing. If I am able to argue successfully against the religions of the people and make fools of them and have not his love, I am nothing. If I have all faith and great ideals and magnificent plans and not his love that sweats and bleeds and weeps and prays and pleads, I am nothing. If I give my clothes and money to them and have not his love for them, I am nothing. If I surrender all prospects, leave home and friends, make the sacrifices of a missionary career, and turn sour and selfish amid the daily annoyances and slights of a missionary life, and have not the love that yields its rights, its leisures, its pet plans, I am nothing. Virtues have ceased to go out of me. If I can heal all manner of sickness and disease, but wound hearts and hurt feelings, for want of his love that is kind, I am nothing. If I can write articles or publish books that win applause, but fail to transcribe the word of the cross into the language of his love, I am nothing. Nothing. Something to think about. A very familiar passage, and yet it challenges every one of us to think about this evening. You remember John Newton? He was raised in a Christian home in which he was taught Bible verses. His mother passed when he was only 6 and was sent to live with a relative who hated the Bible. He was wild in those years and was known for being able to swear for 2 hours without repeating himself. Amazing. He was forced to enlist in the British Navy, was deserted, captured, and beaten publicly as a punishment. Eventually, Newton got into a merchant marine and went to Africa. In his memoirs, he wrote that he went to Africa for only one reason and one reason alone, that he might sin his fill. Newton fell in with a Portuguese slave trader in whose home he was cruelly treated. This man often went away on slaving expeditions. His power passed to his African wife, who was the chief woman of the harem, hated all white men, and vented her hatred on Newton. For months, he was forced to grovel in the dirt, eating his food from the ground like a dog, was beaten mercilessly if he touched it. Very thin Newton made his way to the sea, where he was picked up by the British ship. Knowing something about navigation, the captain of the ship made him ship's mate. Even then, Newton fell into trouble, broke out the supply of rum, and got the crew drunk. He was so drunk himself that the captain returned and struck him on the head. He fell overboard and would have drowned. Only one sailor quickly hauled him back on board. As they were approaching Scotland, he ran into bad weather. Blown off course, water poured in, and the ship began to sink. The storm lasted 4 days, and he thought he was going to die. He was terrified. The God of all grace, whom he tried to forget, brought to his mind Bible verses. The way of salvation opened up to him. He was born again, totally transformed, who later, when he was in England, studied theology, eventually becoming a preacher. His story is contained in these words, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." Brothers and sisters, no matter where you have been in your life, no matter where you are in terms of your spiritual spectrum, no matter how you are tonight, God desires you not to stay where you are, but to be thankful, realizing that He has saved you from your wretchedness, your wickedness, that God has saved you, a wretched like yourself and like myself. We are saved by His grace, His mercy. We ought to be forgiving. We ought to be more loving because God has forgiven us infinitely. He has forgiven us. How dare we hold a grudge on someone? How dare we have some kind of ill feeling toward somebody when God has forgiven us so much more? Amazing grace it is. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you for the price you paid, bearing all my sin and shame. In love you came and gave amazing grace. Thank you for this love, Lord. Thank you for the nail-pierced hands. Wash me in your cleansing foam. Now all I know is your forgiveness and embrace. And worthy is the Lamb seated on the throne. We crown you now with many crowns. You reign victorious, high and lifted up. Jesus, Son of God, the darling